So in 2009, what were the resources available to a doubting, questioning Jehovah's Witness? Were there podcasts? Were there websites? Were there Reddit groups? Were there email forums, Facebook groups? What were there famous known ex-Jehovah's Witness sort of evangelists or missionaries? What resources were available to you 10 years ago or not?
I don't remember YouTube being a massive thing back then, but there was obviously Crisis of Conscience, there was JW Facts, and there were forums. And so in 2010, moving into 2011, I can't remember exactly when, but I started going on forums. I think this was, although I think this was after I'd been on JW Facts. The very first thing I did, to be honest, John, is I went on Wikipedia, because I thought, well, Wikipedia is a quote-unquote neutral source, so I'm not going to just be listening to apostate rantings. I just want to kind of get an objective viewpoint on my religion so that I can understand whether I'm crazy or not. And what I found on Wikipedia was fascinating. And by the way, Wikipedia is something like of a war zone between JWs and ex-JWs who are kind of racing to edit articles according to their own ideas. But there was just enough on Wikipedia to make me think, no, I'm on the right track here, because there were one or two points that were made about the governing body and the faithful slave and that kind of thing, which I thought, no, that's absolutely right. I am on the right track. And then once
what was wrong with the governing body and the faithful slave?
There was a teaching which changed in 2012. As of 2012, the teaching changed so that the faithful and discreet slave, which is the channel of wisdom to mankind, is only the governing body, okay? But before 2012, the teaching was that the faithful and discreet slave are all of the anointed who are alive on the earth, and the governing body are the representatives of that faithful and discreet slave. And that made no sense at all, because if you're going to represent a group of people, you need to at least communicate a little with them. But the governing body didn't communicate at all with all of the Jehovah's Witnesses who believed they were going to heaven. There was they didn't have any, there was zero contact with them. So one of my 9 grievances was, how can they call themselves the representatives of the faithful slave when they never talk to them? You know, they're just awarding themselves that title. But then in 2012, they changed it to say, well, actually, you know, let's cut out the middleman here. Forget about the anointed, just the governing body or the faithful slave.
Now, you were saying this was in 2009, but this change happened in 2012, but your faith crisis was in 2009. So
no, it was more 2010. So 2009 was when I moved to Croatia.
Okay.
I moved at the end of August, and then by January of 2010, I kind of reached the conclusion that I wasn't going to be a Jehovah's Witness.
But the 2012 change would have bothered you later, is that right?
Yeah, I was already up and running as an activist by that point. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you've got this. So when you tell your wife about these concerns, and she's a native Croatian?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What was her response?
Well, her first response was, Lloyd's trying to leave me.
Leave me?
Is he just concocting an excuse that he's losing his faith so that he can leave me, marry someone else, and suddenly he's a Jehovah's Witness again? But when I was able to convince her that, no, I'm not trying to leave you, I want to stay with you, it's just that I can't believe this anymore, and she was convinced that I was genuine. She was obviously very sad, and I think she says that at one of the meetings she can remember crying during the song that I wasn't there with her. But the approach that I took with Deanna was because I kind of realized the dangerous situation I was in, where there was a very real likelihood that the marriage wasn't going to make it, which is what happens in lots of cases of a similar kind. And So the approach that I took was, I'm not going to bombard her with information. I'm not going to kind of confront her and say, we're in a cult and you need to leave with me and that kind of thing. I just thought, well, inevitably she's going to come to me and try to salvage my faith. And when that happens, I need to respond as tactfully and astutely as I can in the way I phrase things and what I say. And if I discover something that's genuinely surprising, I'm not going to hide my surprise from her. So, for example, there's lots of scandals that Jehovah's Witnesses just are unaware of. And as I was uncovering these scandals, I didn't hide my surprise. I shared them with her, and she found those unsettling. And approximately a year after I'd, quote unquote, woken up, she woke up. So she was roughly 12 months behind me. But that process of just kind of taking it easy and not overwhelming her, that mostly worked.
And did you have kids at the time?
No, it was when Deanna was pregnant that it kind of forced our hand and made us realize, no, we need to formally disassociate. It's not enough to just be inactive, because our genuine fear, it wasn't just a fear, it was a very justified concern, was that if we remained as only inactive and we had a child, that child would be inundated with indoctrination from any of our relatives who are Jehovah's Witnesses, and they would justify indoctrinating our child, saying, well, we're only doing what you should be doing. We need to make a clean break. We need to spare our child from all of this nonsense. So that was what eventually pushed us into saying, no, we're done with this. And that was in December 2013.
6 years ago. Okay. So between that point of you telling her, you said you had to talk to your parents. Is that right?
Yeah, my dad. I had to phone Dad, and there were multiple stages with Dad. The first stage was telling him I no longer believed, and his reaction was, "Oh, I'm sorry. That's actually too much of a shock for me, Lloyd. You're going to have to talk to someone else about that, because that's too emotional for me to deal with." Even though he's an elder and it's his job to help people in that situation. And
did you expect a different response? Were you hoping for a loving response? Did you have a relationship with him where that was really shocking to you, that response?
I had a good relationship with him, and I still would like to have a relationship with him. But if I'm completely honest, he's not, how can I put it? He has emotional deficiencies, I think, is a diplomatic way of saying it. I think that he out of both of my parents, he was the least emotionally engaged. And whether that's something to do with his childhood, and I know that his father was abusive towards him, so maybe that played a part in the way he is as a parent. But I continue, even if Dad were to wake up and we had our relationship back, I think I'll go to my grave resenting the fact that if he really believes it's the truth, the least he can do is try to salvage me, is try to convince me to stay. He made no effort whatsoever, which I will always, I think, even when we patch things up, I'm sorry, no matter how indoctrinated you are. In fact, if you are indoctrinated and you really believe it's the truth, that should be motivating you to convince me. And I've heard of stories of others who've left. I'm thinking of one friend of mine who's an ex-Bethelite. His dad actually turned up on his doorstep and was screaming at him, trying to get a conversation started, confronting him and saying, what are you doing? You need to stay in the truth. I'd have loved if my dad could have done that. I'd have loved it, because at least he's trying, but Dad didn't try at all. And so I had to go through the process of telling him that I was inactive. That was difficult. And then as my exit loomed, it looked like my elders were at one point trying to engineer a scenario where they could disfellowship me. And so I warned my dad. I said, Dad, it looks like they want to disfellowship me.
In Croatia or back in the UK?
In Croatia, yeah.
Okay.
Because they were convinced that the reason there must be more to my lapse of faith. There must be some kind of sin that I'm concealing. And one of the elders actually dragged my wife to one side at the Kingdom Hall and interrogated her and said, we know that Lloyd's treating you like a cloth for cleaning the floor. You need to tell us what it is that he's doing so that we can help him. And Deanna was just completely bewildered because the guy who was doing this didn't even know me. He'd only just recently joined the congregation. And here he was assuming the very worst of me as a person. And so she just came straight back and told me. And I immediately made it clear to the elders, well, that what's happened there with you interrogating my wife without me being present, you know that is entirely against the procedures for elders. So until you apologize for doing that, I'm not going to be entertaining any meetings or conversations with you guys until you apologize. And I made that stipulation knowing full well that I would never get an apology because elders never apologize. And that bought me a little bit of time. But when that happened, I feared that they were coming for me, especially if you read Crisis of Conscience, where the same thing happens to Ray Franz, and suddenly the knives are out and they're trying to chase him out of the religion. I felt like the same thing was happening to me. And I rang my dad and I said, Dad...
Had you read that book by that point?
By that point, I read that book, yeah.
What was it like when you read it?
Oh, it was just mind-blowing. It completely validated everything that I'd feared and added a few extra issues. And it also was the missing piece of the jigsaw in explaining what Mum had told me just before she died, where she sat down and said, Lloyd, I want to tell you about my first marriage and how the elders treated me. And so to have Ray Franz, who was there at the time, saying, well, this is what happened in 1972 when we came up with these all crazy rules about, no adultery for homosexuality, no divorce for homosexuality. Everything suddenly fell into place. And
did you get a sense your mom was telling you she didn't believe or that she had problems with the church? Or
no, I believe Mum did believe. I think she went to her grave as a believing Jehovah's Witness. But I will always, always be grateful for that parting gift, because my sister didn't get that. And I think my sister to this day, I don't have a good relationship with my sister, by the way, and never really have, but she thinks I'm making things up. And no, I'm not. That this really happened. We really had this conversation. And again, it wasn't Mum, trying to sow doubts in my mind. It was just Mum telling me something that had been on her mind, and she needed me to know how things had really happened. And when I read Crisis of Conscience, everything suddenly, there was this harmony between this story that I'd been carrying with me for years, and here's this former governing body member corroborating what she's told me. So yeah. I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I'm probably going to get disfellowshipped. And he said, it will kill me, Lloyd, but I'll have to shun you. And so
it'll kill you what?
It will kill me to do it, Lloyd, but I'm going to have to shun you if that happens.
Oh my gosh.
And that was even, and I said, you mean even if I'm disfellowshipped for an unfair reason? And he said, yes. So I knew that would be his stand. And then this would have been about 2012 or 2011, thereabouts. And then by the time 2013 comes along, I'm already well and truly into my activism. The YouTube channel started around 2012, so I was well underway, but I was keeping all of my work below the radar, and I was operating under a pseudonym, John Cedars, which I still have as the name of my channel. And we just reached this crossroads in 2013 where we thought, no, our child's coming, we need to make a clean break. And anticipating that we would be disassociated or we would disassociate, I convinced my dad to come for one final holiday in Croatia. And he didn't know the full reason why I'd invited him. But one evening, I sat him down and I said, Dad, I need you to know Deanna and I are going to be disassociating. And here are the reasons. And I had prepared like laminated newspaper articles to show him and various things that explained why I had these grievances and what have you. And he just kind of sat there in stunned silence. And he tried to kind of defend one or two things that I was showing him. But we reached a point where he said, well, Lloyd, you've given me a lot to think about, and I'm very, very tired. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go to bed. And I was like, okay, well, I can imagine it's all very overwhelming for you. So he went to bed. And the next day, he came to me and he said, Lloyd, when you disassociate, I will be shunning you. Or we're not going to have any further contact. And I really broke down at that point, and I said a few choice words to him. I was really angry at him because he hadn't even evidently tried to, again, salvage me. He hadn't tried to defend the religion in any way, shape, or form, which I believe as an elder he had a moral duty to. He just capitulated and said, all right, well, that's the situation. As soon as you're disassociated, I'm going to be shunning you. And that's exactly what happened. So that, and what happened was, what led to the disassociation was that I finally
Wait, really quick, what's it like to have your dad say that to you? I will be shunning you.
I cried. I broke down in tears. I was inconsolable. And I said, you're a robot. I said, you're a robot and you're a hypocrite. I regret this now, by the way. I wouldn't encourage this approach for someone in this situation. But I said, you go to people's homes, to the homes of strangers, to convince them to join your religion. And in doing so, you criticize their religion and point out all of the logical flaws in their religion. But the minute your own son tries to show you logical flaws in your religion, you won't listen. I said, you're a hypocrite. And it wasn't the right approach. I would have done it differently, given another roll of the dice. But I can understand why that was an emotional situation for me to go through, having already lost my mother and only having my dad left. I really did try and salvage him, and in my heart of hearts, I guess I knew it wasn't going to work, but I kind of hoped it would. I hoped he would at least hear me out, and he didn't have the courage to do that. And again, even if we patch up our relationship, there's a lot that I'll be able to forgive Dad for. But in my mind, if you take your religion seriously, you defend it. And he never even tried to defend it. Especially with so much at stake, especially staring at the possibility of no longer having any further contact with your son. And now that I'm a parent, I'm sorry, there's just nothing that could ever come between me and my daughter. When you go through that process, it's like, I don't know whether you've got kids, by the way, but you just think, how could anyone ever shun their kid? It's the most unnatural thing in the world. So for my dad to reach a point where he could do that, to the point where he is passing up on opportunities to see his granddaughter, I can't make sense of it. So there'll be a lot of things that I would forgive Dad for if we were ever reunited, but there are some things that I'm going to have to hold on to, I think.
And in the work I've done with ex-Mormons, when a Mormon is disaffected or starts doubting and starts going through this crisis of faith, and they're terrified, and they write letters or emails or try and communicate with believing family and friends, about their crisis of faith. And they could have been a stake president, a bishop. They could have been a Relief Society president, a top leader in the church. They could have been a grandfather. It doesn't matter how much commitment they had, how much they had served, how much they had done for their loved ones. The most common reaction is silence. And the almost unheard of reaction, which is the most logical, is, oh my gosh, I love you. You're important to me. You're smart. You really took this seriously. If you have doubts and if you've left, I want to know everything that you know, because there's nothing more important, and I love you so much. And that is an almost unheard of reaction. A less frequent reaction is, well, let's talk about the problems and really get to the bottom of this, but I'm going to defend the church. The most common reaction is being completely ignored.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that, at least in my case, it's counterproductive, because I can understand why in the majority of cases the emotional blackmail succeeds, and the shunned son or daughter thinks, well, just so I can have some contact, I'm going to at least pretend to be a Jehovah's Witness again and go through the motions and what have you. And some do that. But that doesn't really work if you leave for ideological reasons, and those ideological reasons aren't addressed. I had very, very clear reasons that Dad wasn't willing to listen to, and the only way he was going to see his son come back to the religion was by disproving my issues. He didn't even try to. And what's happened since then is obviously that I've gone on to become an ex-Jehovah's Witness activist. And if my email inbox is to be believed, I've been responsible for it, to at least some degree, in at least creating material that can help other people get out of the organization. So his behavior toward me and toward Deanna has had the opposite effect of actually making more problems for his organization. I mean, I like to think that I would still have had something to say as an activist, even if I hadn't been personally even if I didn't have personal experience of shunning. But the truth is that if there is a fire in my belly, the fire is due to, again, the personal experience of having genuine, conscientious reasons for no longer believing. And rather than having those reasons explored and addressed and debated, to just be treated as though you don't exist, no questions asked.
Yeah. So I'm so sorry I can't imagine what it's like to be shunned. Mormonism doesn't have this hard shunning, certainly not as a doctrine or policy. It's more judgment and soft shunning or alienation, and it's not universal. There's going to be a wide variety of familial reactions, anywhere from, on the extreme positive end, love and support; on the extreme negative end, disassociation, shunning, silence, removal from wills or inheritance. And then in the middle, it's the mass, majority is just going to be disappointment, judgment, false assumptions, mischaracterizations, rumors about false motives, and just the withdrawal of emotional intimacy and respect that downgrades the person's status from a person of high status and respect in the family to a status of disrespect and disappointment. And in some sense, being removed from the text chain, being removed from some family meetings, just being treated as a second-class citizen within the family. That's probably the norm, but it does not in any way reach these formal levels of disassociation and shunning, which is just something we can't imagine. And it's more like Scientology.
Yeah.
And,
definitely.
That's where Jehovah's Witness sort of maybe becomes more severe than Mormonism and starts to reach the severity of Scientology.
Oh, definitely. And, frankly, John, we're social creatures. We're just not programmed to deal with shunning And I always think of, I don't know whether you've heard of Dr. Kip Williams. He has done research on ostracism, and he developed computer systems, in fact, to measure the reaction when someone is shunned. And you may think, well, how can you measure shunning? And he stumbled on this technique by taking a walk in the park, and there were these two guys throwing a frisbee to each other. And all of a sudden, they threw the frisbee to him, and he threw the frisbee back. And all of a sudden, with these total strangers, he's involved in a game of frisbee. But then, completely unexpectedly, they started throwing the frisbee to themselves again and pretending he wasn't there. And even though these were total strangers, he felt this very visceral feeling of anger and resentment that he had suddenly been excluded from this activity. And he thought, well, that's what I've got to do. I've got to recreate that. So he created this computer system where you engage in like a ball throwing exercise with either with digital people or with real people, and suddenly the game switches and your reaction is monitored. And it's even thinking about that scenario, being in that scenario with total strangers, I can imagine how it would feel for me. We are social creatures. We cannot handle exclusion for no good reason, and that's what shunning is. Just being treated as though you don't exist without justifiable reason. And it's a really, really evil, it's psychological warfare, and it needs to be resisted. It needs to be exposed, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with my work.
Yeah, I think psychologists have found that overt cruelty is actually preferable to shunning psychologically.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I would rather have, I'd rather get beaten up, I think, than go through that. Being made to feel as though you're something less than human. Again, because of a conscientious stand that you've taken. It really, really does mess with your head. And again, if there's a fire in my belly, it's because of that. It's the fact that I've been relegated as a human being just for having conscientious reasons for no longer entertaining certain religious ideas.
So tell us how you became an activist, and what was the progression of projects or initiatives? Because not everyone who leaves a fundamentalist religion becomes an activist.
No.
It's a special calling.
Well, it is, yeah. Well, you asked before about what internet resources there were back then, and there was one forum which actually still exists. It was JWN, jehovahswitness.net. I think it's now jehovahswitness.com. And it was a forum where you could join, but you could join anonymously and no one know who you are. And I remember for a while being addicted to it, because suddenly you're interacting with people who are like you, who are the cast-offs, the ones who have been rejected, or who are perhaps, maybe they're still perceived to be believers, but they are keeping their doubts to themselves. And so it was a fascinating experience for me to suddenly be engaged with this online community.
Okay, wait, so the church didn't grab its own domain name?
They originally had watchtower.org, and then when they streamlined their web presence, they called it jw.org.
Okay, so someone else was able to grab a primary domain using the Jehovah's Witness name and turn it into a public forum that wasn't formally controlled by the church, and it became sort of an anti-JW forum?
Yeah, I think it's jehovahs-witness.com or something like that.
All right.
So that was kind of my introduction to dealing with other ex-witnesses. And one idea I had was, because I could see there were a range of opinions on almost everything, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could have some kind of survey so that we can gauge how people feel on certain issues, such as shunning, such as child abuse, such as blood transfusions, and etc. And I started putting out feelers for who would be interested in maybe buying a subscription service. And I got a ton of heat because people thought I was trying to, because I was proposing that we buy like a SurveyMonkey subscription, which is a few $100s a year. And people thought that I was trying to con people out of money. And so I got a ton of heat. But one guy came to the rescue. His name was John Hoyle. We're still very good friends. And he said, listen, I like your idea. Don't worry about SurveyMonkey. I will build you a website with its own survey feature. What do you think? And so I was like, well, what do I have to lose? You know, if this guy wants to build me a website, I'm going to let him build me a website. So he built JWSurvey.org.
Okay, so your first idea, your first foray into Jehovah's Witness activism was to come up with the survey.
Yeah.
And what was your strategy?
My strategy was, again, I felt as though Jehovah's Witnesses are silenced because they can only have one opinion, and that's the opinion of the governing body. And I wanted to know what their genuine opinions were by having an online survey where people could anonymously, even believing Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, wow.
Could anonymously say, well, this is what I really think.
So I'm at jwsurvey.org, and I see you've published 2011 through 2017.
Yeah. We're having a bit of a change around. We're trying. We've had a move around in the team, so we're trying to get a new survey set up for 2019.
But would you post? Yeah. So this is a way to give voice to members about how they feel about the church.
Yeah.
Did you each year publish the results of the survey?
Yeah. So every year we publish the results, and to begin with, I would kind of write a letter to the governing body and make it very. I think we even returned by recorded delivery the first few surveys to the governing body. Obviously, never got a response.
Okay, I'm not seeing the letters published on the website.
No, they're in a PDF document. You can, for the first few surveys, if you click on the results, it should take you to a PDF. And in the first couple of pages of the PDF, there's a letter there to the governing body.
Why did you stop writing the letter?
Because I never got a reply. I thought, well, there's no point dignifying them with a letter when it's more powerful to just let the results speak for themselves, you know, and just summarize the results so that people can read the results for themselves.
So where can you find the summary of results for the 2017 survey?
We're still, again, we've had a change around with the team because I found that with my work, I'm increasingly distracted by my YouTube work, and we've had to kind of change the personnel around at JW Survey. So we have someone now who's trying to kind of get everything stabilized with the survey so that we can publish the results for 2017 and 2018 and put something out for 2019.
Okay, so when was the last year you published the results?
I think it was it 2017 or 2016?
I just got an error in the site that my access has been limited to the site because I exceeded the maximum global request per minute.
Oh, you're attacking us, John Dehlin. You're giving us a DOS attack.
I'm your best friend.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's happened there.
No, it's fine. Anyway, So that was your first foray. What was the response both for believing, for your family, for your wife, for believing Jehovah's Witnesses, and for the ex-witness community?
What, to the survey? Well, they didn't know. They didn't know about it. I was running the survey. I started. JW Survey began in October 2011, and it was November 2013 by the time I'd outed myself as Lloyd Evans. So
those first couple of years, no one knew it was you.
Yeah, exactly. And
did your wife know you were doing it?
Oh, obviously, yeah. I didn't.
Well, not obviously. People do things in secret.
Well, I researched without her necessarily knowing, but by the time I was an activist, I was just, she just, she didn't like it, but It was
Why
just
didn't she like it?
because she was still a believing Jehovah's Witness.
When you started?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or still had some level of indoctrination. But JW Survey was the beginning, and then and pretty soon I started writing blog articles for JW Survey. So I kind of took on more of a journalistic role, you could say, of keeping tabs on the latest stories that were going on with Watchtower. And so this blog started, and the blog kind of merged and then evolved into the John Cedars YouTube channel, because I just found over the course of time that I could impact people more with videos than with blog articles. To begin with, the videos were just a supplement to the blog, but pretty soon I noticed that I could reach more people just comparing the statistics with a YouTube video than with a blog article. And all the while I'd been writing my book. So I started writing my book in 2012. And then in late 2016, I had a major push to get it finished. And I published it in the beginning of 2017. That's The Reluctant Apostate.
So it took you how long to write your book?
4 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And if you order it, you'll see why, because it's 800 pages. That took a lot of research and a lot of soul searching as well, because obviously I write about in addition to writing about the history of Jehovah's Witnesses, I also kind of I thread through my own story. So I'll talk about something that happened in my story and then connect it with something from Jehovah's Witness teachings or Jehovah's Witness history, if that makes sense. So that's kind of my way of introducing the reader kind of gradually to various aspects.
Okay, so the YouTube channel became your really big way to make a difference. I'm on your channel now. Again, it's called John Cedars, CEDARS, the John Cedars channel.
Yeah.
There's 44,741 subscribers. Mormon Stories only has 15,000 subscribers.
Well, you need to get your act together, John. I'm sorry.
You're 3 times more effective than I am on YouTube.
Well, it's clearly you're failing in some way. So I suggest you try harder.
Okay, and so you've got how many videos? What's your basic format for activism? Are these short videos? Are they long form?
Most of them, I get. A lot of them are maybe an hour, because I do rebuttals to Watchtower video propaganda, which tends to itself be maybe an hour long for the JW broadcasting episodes. So it's difficult for me to do a rebuttal to one of these episodes that isn't itself at least an hour long. And there's also convention videos that get shown at conventions that I do rebuttals for. But every now and then I'll do a shorter video that addresses a certain subject. And my most watched video with over 700,000 views is a 5-minute video, everything you need to know about Jehovah's Witnesses in 5 minutes. So that's like my most viewed video, and it's 5 minutes. And I actually did a follow-up to that, everything you need to know about Mormons in 5 minutes.
Hey, stay away, lay off us.
But that did, even though I collaborated to some degree with a former Mormon to make sure it was accurate. Yeah, Jonathan. It's for some reason that hasn't taken off so well, but the Jehovah's Witness one has taken off. Yeah.
Okay. So what has the reaction been in the global reaction to your videos?
I guess it depends who's watching them. I recently, the very latest video that I've put out is the most ambitious video I've ever done, which is a documentary. I actually drove to the Netherlands and spent a week interviewing victims of abuse and advocates for an organization.
Reclaimed Voices, abuse survivors speak out.
So that's Reclaimed Voices are an organization that represents victims of abuse from within the Jehovah's Witness community in the Netherlands, and they've been so successful that they have actually managed to get the Dutch government to launch an independent investigation into Jehovah's Witnesses in that country, which is, compared to other countries, that's pretty much unheard of. So I made this documentary. I shot it back in October, and I've only just now managed to, get it uploaded and edited and what have you. But I was really touched by one message in particular, because you asked about reaction. And it was from someone saying that he had been out of the organization for 20 years. And all that time, his wife refused to look at anything that was critical of the organization. And he managed to persuade her after 20 years to watch the Reclaimed Voices documentary. And he said she was crying all the way through because her brother had been molested within the organization. So, who knows whether that will go anywhere, maybe with her looking at other material, I don't know. But that sort of message, I'm sure you get messages like that with the work, with the amazing work you're doing as well. It really motivates you, I think, to carry on.
I know you don't tend to sort of want glory or hyperbole directed towards yourselves, but I have to ask, are you maybe the world's most notable ex-Jehovah Witness activist, or are there others that have your level or profile or higher?
I don't view it as a competition.
Yeah.
I'm not deliberately trying to be kind of bashful or anything or coy. It's just, I don't know. There's actually one channel that's got more subscribers to mine, if you want to measure it that way. That's called Telltale Atheist. So he's got like 90,000 subscribers.
And he's a former Jehovah's Witness?
He's a former Jehovah's Witness, but his channel touches more generally on cults and religion and that kind of thing.
I don't ask the question out of a sense of competition. It's a sense to get, it's a question to get a sense for the field, the playing field. In other words, do you have peers that you collaborate with, or others that are at your level of profile, such that there's a group of activists that are kind of working shoulder to shoulder in their different formats? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we have a team. So we have like a periodical podcast style show called Watchtower in Focus, which I host, and we have some other kind of notable ex-JWs on there. Mark O'Donnell, who's kind of the real kind of investigative reporter of the ex-JW movement. He's on every show. And Covert Fade, who is now the editor of JW Survey, he's on every show. But the view I take of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses is that just because someone is an ex-Jehovah's Witness, I'm sure it's the same with ex-Mormons, doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be a balanced, kind of rational, reasonable person to work with. I think that when someone's in a destructive group, it can mess around with one's head to some degree, and it leaves people with a lot of anger. And what we find in the ex-JW movement is that sometimes people take that anger out on other ex-JWs, especially other ex-JWs who are perceived as having a large following, such as myself. So that's one of the ironies, really, of my activism work, is that despite having kind of made a name for myself to some degree for criticizing Watchtower and dismantling the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses, in all the years that I've been involved in activism, I've hardly had any kind of pushback from Watchtower or even from Jehovah's Witnesses. The main opponents or the main people who've pushed back against my work have been other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. And it's tragic, but that's the way it is.
It has been exactly the same with me. The people who have been most harmful, most hurtful, most damaging have been fellow ex-Mormons.
Yeah. Who do you think you are, John Dehlin, giving your opinion? That's not what we think. You don't represent us. You're arrogant. You're egotistical. You just want to start a new Mormon church and blah, blah, blah.
What do you think that's about?
Again, we're dealing with a community of people who've been messed around in their heads. And, it's messed us around, hasn't it? We feel the effects of having our thoughts dictated to us for a significant chunk of our lives, and that leaves residual anger and residual, you could say, demons that we've had to deal with or are continuing to deal with. And maybe we've been successful to at least some degree in facing those issues, but not everyone is successful. And sometimes people take their anger out not on the organization, but on other ex-members who they feel are misrepresenting them, or who are getting attention that they feel they should be getting, or who are voicing opinions that they feel are dangerous, that shouldn't be listened to. It's really tragic, but that's, unfortunately, it goes with the territory. And even though I may be a well-known ex-JW activist now, I'm almost certainly not going to be around forever. And well, I'm not going to be around forever. And whoever follows is going to have exactly the same problem, because it's just the nature of what we take on.
How do you have a day job, or do you do this full time?
I'm now full time. I started full time in January 2017 when my book went out, and just those royalties just helped me to make that jump to being a full-time activist. So
did you start a nonprofit, or is it for profit, or how does that work?
I just run everything. It's not a non-profit. No, I'm a professional activist. So I run everything. I have like an accountant, and I just run everything through my business. And the idea being that I'm going to produce content that's freely accessible. And so I'm allowed to do that through my book royalties, through Google ad revenue, and through my patrons.
So Google ad revenue?
Yeah. So on YouTube, when they show adverts, I don't know whether your channel's monetized, but when they show adverts on YouTube videos.
But it may bring in 5,000 a year. It's very small revenue.
Yeah. It's not so bad for me personally. It's not a bad figure, and it just, again.
You say it is a lot bigger?
I don't know whether we should be comparing figures, but it's.
Oh,
it's,
no!
It's
not
small
competition. I'm not thinking from a standpoint of competition. Yeah. It's just.
It started off like $60 a month,
right?
And it's now significant. It's now into the hundreds. And that kind of that amount coming in, combined with other revenue, it means that you can just focus entirely on the activism.
Yeah. No, I get it. I'm full-time supported by my work too.
Sure.
Are you ever called to be transparent in your finances? Do you ever get grief about either being transparent or not being transparent, or people accusing you of getting rich or making money off of people's, pain and distress?
I'm not called to be transparent because I think people realize that that's just silly. But I do get people.
Well, why is it silly? That's a huge thing in the ex-Mormon community. Is people wanting blood if you're not transparent with your finances?
Because I'm not. People aren't forced to give me money. I don't ask for money. If people want to contribute to my work, they can do. But if I were going around extorting people, or I were promising something but then not delivering it, then let's start talking about transparency. But if people want to donate to my work without me asking them to, and they feel that they are getting something in return in terms of they're happy with the content that I'm putting out, why do I need to explain myself? And with ex-witnesses, that I don't get asked for transparency, but I do get people saying, "Oh, he's just in it for the money. He's managed to take people's hurt and people's trauma, and he's he's profiting from it." And my response to that would be, I've made 300 blog articles, and I think 400 YouTube videos, all of which are accessible entirely for free. The 2 books that I've written, you could, in theory, read for free if you ordered them at the library. So there's actually nothing that I've made that I'm withholding from people. It's all accessible for free. And if people want to reimburse me for doing that so that I'll continue to do it, because I don't owe anyone anything. I've woken up. I've moved on with my life. I have a happy family life. And if people think that I owe people this activism, as though I should do it, whether I'm being paid or not, no one owes anyone anything. You don't know. You don't owe the ex-Mormon community the Mormon Stories podcast. You owe them nothing. It's what you choose to do. And yeah, I just find it very odd that people would expect me to. And then another thing I say to people is, well, okay, if you disagree with me being a professional activist, here's what you need to do. You need to run my channel or a channel equivalent to mine. You need to do the activism work that I'm doing, and hold down a full-time job, and make time to be a husband and a father. And once you've done all of those things successfully, then you can come back to me and say that I'm wrong for being a professional activist. But it's one of those situations where people criticize you without necessarily feeling as though they could, do what you're doing, or without wanting to kind of walk a mile in your shoes.
Yeah.
End of rant.
I love it. So have you had very generous donors come out and support you?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I was able to go to the Netherlands. And I think that's one of the beautiful things actually about Patreon. I know Patreon's had its issues with the way it's run, and with certain characters, certain public figures having their Patreon accounts closed for very arbitrary reasons. And I disagree with that. But in my own experience, it's enabled people who believe in what I'm doing to donate as little as $1 a month, and it all adds up. And it means that because I'm a professional activist, and because I'm answerable to this community of people, and there's now over 300 on Patreon who are supporting me, they are I view them as my boss. They are collectively my boss, and I owe them videos. I owe them, content of a certain quality. And one of the things I promised them I would do is make a documentary film every year. So that was what enabled me to think, right, what projects are there? What could I make a documentary film on? There's this happening in the Netherlands. I'm going to drive to the Netherlands, and I'm going to spend a week there filming. And I'm going to do all of this. I'm going to commit to doing the months of editing that this would entail, because I'm being paid to do it by these people. If they weren't paying for me to do it, this documentary film, the Reclaimed Voices documentary film, literally would not exist. And that's the point I make in the end credits as well. So,
and it has over 20,000, 16,000 views already.
Yeah, it's I would encourage people to watch it. And I'm not a fan of going on other people's channels and saying, oh, you need to watch this video, but this particular subject and this particular video, in all of the videos I've made, this is the one. If I had to choose one for someone to watch, it would be this one, because, same with Mormonism, any organization, its absolute minimum requirement is that it looks after the most vulnerable, and that it certainly doesn't put them in harm's way and put them in a situation where, for example, children are at risk from sexual predators. And that's what Watchtower is doing in country after country after country. And in one country in particular, the Netherlands, the survivors banded together and said, enough of this. We're going to do something about it. And their bravery and their resourcefulness really shines through, or at least I hope it shines through. I hope I've done justice to their story, but it was a real privilege to tell it. So if your viewers are interested, I'd really appreciate if they could take a look.
I love it. Is there, you mentioned something like a coalition of ex-Jehovah's Witness activists that work together in some collaborative way. Is that true or not?
Well, we have our JW survey team, and we have like a WhatsApp group where we all communicate regularly. And that's not just JW survey, but also a documentary project that I'm involved in called The Truth About the Truth. So we have my co-producer, Javier, he's also part of the group. And I guess, I don't know what it's like with Mormonism, but you have it with the ex-JW movement. You have the kind of firebrands, and you have the kind of loose cannons and people who just rant on screen. and people who, you know, indulge in attacking other activists, and then you have the more serious ones who basically just go after Watchtower and limit their activism to debunking cults and the kind of destructive ways of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I just deal exclusively with those, and I ignore all of the ones that are just jumping up and down ranting. And I find that approach helps. And so what we'll do is we'll do collaborative videos together. I did one recently with another ex-JW YouTuber called Fifth. His channel is ex-JW Fifth. And we did a video collaboration where we just literally went through the FAQ section of the jw.org website, pointing out all of the lies and all of the ways that they were trying to mislead people, which was interesting.
That's awesome. Is there ever amongst the activists kind of rivalries or factions that emerge where people, you mentioned this a little bit about people who try and take each other down. Does it ever rise to the point where kind of leaders in the ex-JW movement are kind of going at each other or amassing followers to kind of try and take each other down?
I wish I could say no. But we literally have a group in the ex-JW movement that call themselves the Vast Apostate Army. And the fact that they've called themselves an army kind of tells you something about the approach that they take. They favor what's called Kingdom Hall crashing, where they literally go into a Kingdom Hall while the services are underway and try to disrupt the meeting and get up in witnesses' faces and confront them and berate them and mock them and what have you, and do the same thing with witnesses who are maybe preaching in public next to one of the literature carts. And they can't stand me. They really, really don't like me. So they've made multiple videos where they just do nothing but slag me off because I've spoken out against that sort of behavior without naming names. So my approach is, you know, life's too short. I'm going to say what I think, even if it offends people, but I'm not going to call people out and I'm not going to name names and make videos about people. But they don't quite follow that. They will literally, if someone like me is saying something that they don't agree with, they'll literally make multiple YouTube videos where they basically character assassinate people. It's really, really very sad. But again, I think it kind of, to a degree, goes with the territory when you're involved in this kind of work.
How do you, this is just a personal kind of person to person, activist to activist question. How do you keep from allowing the critics to depress and overwhelm you to the point of sometimes wanting to quit? How do you keep your spirits up? How do you keep your confidence? How do you keep your determination to keep going when sometimes you feel so mistreated or unappreciated or maligned?
That's a really good question. It does happen now and then that the attacks get overwhelming, and there's been one or two occasions in particular where the gloves have really been off, and there's been like a sustained period of attacking me on something I've said, or saying that I've done something which I absolutely haven't done, or trying to float some kind of conspiracy theory or what have you. And it can really drag me down, quite frankly, because apart from feeling frustration that the value of my work is in some way being diminished, because at least some people are going to believe what they're saying and believe that I'm this monster that they've created. There's also just the kind of feeling of despair that there are human beings out there who have sunk to that state where they view you as more of a target than an organization that breaks apart families, covers up child abuse, and literally kills people, and you're worse than them. And it really does get to me at times. But I like to think that over the years, I've kind of, to some degree, matured and figured out a way of coping, and that coping mostly involves starving them of attention. They want attention. The thing that they absolutely want me to do is make videos replying to their videos, and they quickly get frustrated when that doesn't happen, which is always. So, and I think as well that that level of hatred is exhausting for them. It's not a healthy situation to be in, and it offers diminishing returns. And I think it's exhausting to have that much hatred, quite frankly. So I noticed that these things come in waves, and people lose their energy after a while. But in terms of how I cope by trying my hardest to ignore it, which sometimes is easy and sometimes is more difficult. But I also cope by having a fantastic team around me, including my wife, who is a really good sounding board when stuff's happening. And so, for example, sometimes if there's something in particular that I might need to think about responding to in terms of an accusation or something, she'll be the one to watch the video or read the article, because she knows it's going to drag me down having to deal with all that negativity. So she'll kind of take the bullet for me. And I also have, again, this WhatsApp group where we're like a team and we're really tight knit and we have each other's back. Because I'm not the only one who's been attacked. There've been other, like my friends have been attacked on occasion. And so we have this understanding that, you know, when we're feeling the heat, we can, you know, rant to each other and let each other know our thoughts. And that help. It really does help to just have that outlet for expressing ourselves that doesn't involve fanning the flames by adding further controversy and rebuttals and what have you. So it is difficult. I'm sure it's difficult for you as well. But after many years, you just find a way of dealing with it. And although I have considered quitting on occasion, I think to some degree I'm institutionalized by my job, to the point where I'm at the point now where even if I tried to walk away from activism, I don't think I could. I'd be thinking, I need to make a video. It's quite sad, really. I'm almost addicted to the work I'm doing. But I have had occasions where I've thought, you know what, if this is the way I'm doing my best to help people, and if this is the way I'm being treated, then screw them all. You know, I quit. And I've had times where that thought has floated through my head, and maybe one day it will all get too much, and I will do that. But for now, I feel as though there's still some juice in the tank, and I'm going to carry on.
I love it. And this team you talk about that encourages you and that you commiserate with, it's comprised of what, employees or other activists or what?
I don't have any employees. No, it's just other. So the JW survey team is made up of basically volunteers. Because JW survey, I mean, I think we have like Google ads on the website, but it doesn't make any money or anything. It's just literally making information available. And so all of the team that work on JW survey, we have our own WhatsApp group, and that group also incorporates Javier, who is my co-producer on the Truth About the Truth documentary. So we're able to kind of, again, compare notes and rant when we need to rant and that kind of thing.
That must be nice to have a group of friends that have your back.
I would definitely, and anyone in my position who's doing what I do and who has so much grief from his own side, I would recommend having a team around you who can just kind of act as like a buffer, and who can again provide you that kind of solidarity when times are tough.
I love it. I'm so glad you have it. A quick question, and a shout out to those people. I'm glad they support you and vice versa. Quick question about books, just because I haven't written a book yet, but when I got excommunicated, I was encouraged to by a New York agent. My understanding was you don't make money off of books, like meaningful money, like enough to support you on a year-to-year basis kind of thing.
I think that's true. I think it's different. If you have a, like, you mentioned a New York agent, I don't know what it's like when you have your book published through a publisher. I don't know how that works, because obviously a publisher will have opportunities to distribute the book that aren't available to someone who does a self-published book, which is my situation, where
So you self-published.
I'm self-published and my book's on Amazon. But what I will say is that when you first release the book, and if you have a large enough audience, it does sell a lot of copies. And beyond that, you find that it kind of levels off at a fairly modest number of books per month. I'm trying to think what my figure is. I think usually it's something like 3 copies a day. So let's say 80 or 90 books a month is usual. But then there's always opportunities that might come along. So, for example, when I appeared on the Aftermath special, they very kindly showed.
That's with Leah Remini, right?
That's the Leah Remini Aftermath special, and so my book flashes up at one point, and there was a massive spike in sales after that, which was really lovely. Apart from anything else, it's nice that something that you've slaved over for years is being read. You know, you didn't go through all that trouble for it to not be read. But yeah, I think that if you're looking at kind of a regular income as a professional activist, you're not necessarily going to see it through writing a book, unless it's very popular, unless it sells extremely well.
But the book kind of gets your foot in the door in other areas, right?
Yeah, I'm glad the main reason why I wrote the book is so that there would be a resource available to people, because Crisis of Conscience is one of, if not the go-to books for people leaving the religion. But I wanted something that kind of brought things a bit more up to date, because the organization that Ray Franz describes in many ways has completely changed, and I wanted something that people could relate to today. And so the main reason for writing it was not to make money. It was literally to provide a resource for people who wanted to get out. But I can't think what the question was now. Where my mind was going.
No, just if a book, everyone I've talked to just says, don't write a book for the money, write a book because it spread the word and gets publicity out and gets you opportunities.
That's right.
Work in the media, etc.
It's more than just about royalties. It's about providing like a handshake almost that can, if someone wants to know about you or what you stand for or what your cause is, all they need to do is buy the book. And it's something that people can reference if you have opportunities like the Aftermath special. And I've spoken to people since then, and let's say producers who've approached me, and they've said, "Oh, I've read your book," and immediately I know that they must have a reasonably good understanding of the organization. If they've made it through those 800 pages, it's gonna some of that's gonna stick, So it literally is more about getting the information out there than necessarily watching the royalty checks come in.
Right. I just have to say, when Leah Remini came out with her series, the ex-Mormon community went wild, hoping that she would feature Mormonism at some point. So that remains something that our community is really hoping for.
Well, there's so much material, isn't there? I think that in a way, the media, or let's say the entertainment industry, for want of a better word, is only now understanding what a fertile pasture is to be found in exploring the issues surrounding cults and what these movements do in people's lives. I remember watching a Channel 4 documentary, Meet the Mormons, not the official Meet the Mormons, but the one that was done on Channel 4. I don't know whether you've seen it. Following a missionary in the UK.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I was blown away by that. And there needs to be more stuff like that. I mean, how many years have gone by since that was made? How many how many other subjects could you find with similar stories, or even worse stories than the guy that they kind of stumbled upon, or they were pointed to by the church in that instance? But no, I think that in any number of movements, including Mormonism, where people's lives are being damaged by an authoritarian hierarchy, Hollywood is shooting itself in the foot by ignoring it.
So, in the let's just say in your list of like worst mainstream cults, how do you do you have like a hierarchy of who's the worst and who's, a little bit better? Do you consider Mormonism a cult, and where do we fall on your scale of severity?
Okay, well, I have what might be called an unorthodox approach to defining cults, and it's informed to some degree by my atheism. So I believe that basically all belief structures that are based on things that cannot be proven and are in fact untrue are cults. But you have, in my mind, soft cults and extreme cults. And so a soft cult might be, I don't know, Anglicanism, and that's not to say that there isn't harm being done in Anglicanism, but let's say, for example, you had a religion where they had zero harmful practices. It was literally just, the only problem was that the religion isn't true. Okay. That would still, in my mind, be damaging, because any parents in that group would have to be teaching their children things that aren't true. And if you teach a child something that isn't true as though it's true, you're doing that child a disservice, and you're limiting its development in some way. It's child indoctrination. So even the most benign religion that you could imagine, in my view, would still be, at least to some degree, a cult. But then you have obviously an increasing scale of severity. And so I think that Jehovah's Witnesses and Scientology are comparable. I would actually, I know I'm biased, but I'd put Jehovah's Witnesses slightly higher than Scientology, if only because we've got 8.5 million and Scientology's got like 20, 30,000. So we're impacting more lives, or Jehovah's Witnesses are impacting more lives. With Mormonism is obviously comparable in numbers to Jehovah's Witnesses, although Mormons have a very different way of counting, as I understand it. They basically count almost anyone who's remotely affiliated with the church in the numbers.
But we're around 5 or 6 million active Mormons, so
which is less than the 8.5 million Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay, yeah. So there's more Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah.
When I first started doing the research, I thought there were more Mormons, but then I found out how they do the counting. And
there's more numerically, but not active. Yeah.
So with Mormonism, that we can say it's comparable numbers at the very least. But with Mormonism, I think that they're definitely higher up on the scale than, say, Anglicanism, and arguably higher than Catholicism, depending on the country. Obviously, I think Catholicism can get more extreme in certain parts of the world. But Mormonism has a problem with the extremely hierarchical nature of the organization, the lack of transparency, the manipulation, the worthiness interviews, and the increasing concerns over sex abuse cover-ups, which I'm hearing about.
And the racism and the sexism and the homophobia.
Indeed. And yeah, it's not, even if you take aside the fact that it's just bottom line not true, there's more to it. So I would put it as definitely a cult, but probably not quite as extreme as Jehovah's Witnesses.
Got it. All right.
Mm.
If somebody says you're trying to destroy the church, Jehovah's Witness church, what do you say? Or another way to ask that is, what are your goals? What do you want? If you could wave a magic wand, what would you have happen?
That's a really good question.
Would you destroy the church? Would you make it disappear? Do you think the world would be better off if Jehovah's Witness organization just disappeared?
How can I put it? I suppose so. It's that my problem is that what I really want is for people to be able to think for themselves, and I can't force that on them. You know, so I mean, there's ex-JWs who would like the Warwick headquarters to disappear in a mushroom cloud. But if that were to happen, apart from it being an atrocity, of course, there'd still be 8.5 million Jehovah's Witnesses who believe around the world. You don't stop their delusion by taking out their leaders, if that makes sense. So here's what I would like. I think that all 8 members of the governing body need to serve jail time for being complicit in the cover-up of child sex abuse. And I think that their jail time should be commensurate with how long they have been serving in that capacity. I think that the organization, as a result of that exposure and that kind of action being taken, should be find substantial amounts of money, and that money should find its way to the victims. And I would also like as many Jehovah's Witnesses as possible to have their minds back, to realize that they've been lied to and exploited, and find their way to mental freedom. There's no magic wand scenario, as far as I'm concerned, that can just fix everything that I think needs to be fixed. I can only know roughly what I would like and do my best to try and make that happen. And knowing that at least by doing something, I mean, if you aim high, you're going to achieve higher than you would have achieved if you didn't try and do anything at all. So that's kind of the basis on which I work.
And so for you, the biggest problem by far is the child sexual abuse in Jehovah's Witness organization.
That and the shunning. It's difficult to kind of...
Oh, shunning. Okay. No. I just want to make sure we cover the main ones.
Well, in some ways they're interlinked, because obviously one of the problems that abuse victims have is that they are punished through shunning in many cases by trying to separate themselves from the toxic environment that has helped facilitate.
Victims are shunned.
Yes.
Wow. So the response of the church to a victim coming forth is that victim gets shunned.
Well, that's a little bit overly simplistic. My point is, and this was brought out in the Australian Royal Commission, that if, as an abuse victim, you feel that for one thing, as an abuse victim, you're required to forgive your abuser, which could put you in a situation where you have to, on a weekly basis, attend meetings where you're only a few feet away from the person who has done this to you on a weekly basis. That's what forgiveness means in the Jehovah's Witness religion. So let's say you can't handle that. Let's say you don't want to be a few feet away from your abuser, and your solution is to get out of the organization. Okay, you're going to end up being shunned. So that in many ways, the shunning and the child sex abuse kind of overlaps and kind of goes hand in hand. And I also think that if the shunning were to end or be reversed, so that witnesses were forbidden from shunning disfellowshipped family members, it would enable more witnesses to vote with their feet and hold the leaders directly accountable. Because at the moment, what you have is a captive organization where people aren't allowed to leave even if they want to. So that even though the leadership claims, oh, we've got 8.5 million followers, no, you don't. You've got 8.5 million who identify as Jehovah's Witnesses, some of whom want to leave but can't. So it's a captive organization. And if it ceased to be a captive organization so that people could vote with their feet, I think that alone would organically fix many of the more harmful problems, because the leaders, again, would be more accountable for what they teach and what they practice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, I want to keep talking, but I have a lunch I have to run to today that was scheduled. So let me end with this, Lloyd. Well, first I want to. Well, I'll save my congratulations till the end. But what do you believe now? What are your beliefs? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in the Bible? Do you believe in Jehovah? Do you believe in Jesus? Yeah, I know you already told us, but I want you to summarize with your beliefs. And if you don't believe in Jehovah's Witnessism anymore, what is the set of beliefs or worldview that you've come to that you feel comfortable with?
I believe in things that can be proven. And it turns out that every single one of the world's religions can't be proven or is equally unprovable. So I don't worry about any of them. And in my own case, I understand that not everyone shares this view, and I understand that for whatever reason, some people seem to need religion in their lives. They need to entertain this idea that they can cheat their own death, or they can see their granny again, or whoever. In my own case, I'm comfortable with my mortality. My mortality in many ways motivates me to make the best of the life I have, rather than thinking I can defer things to an afterlife. And it gives me a sense of fulfillment to know that there is satisfaction to be gleaned from leaving the world a slightly better place than you found it, if possible. And I only worry about things that can be proven. And if someone comes to me with an idea, I'll listen to it. I don't shut myself off to religion to that extent where I won't even listen to what people have to say. But I address every religious claim with equal skepticism, and that inevitably leads to me, saying, okay, that's fine if you want to believe that, but you've given me no reason to believe it myself. So that's where I am.
This is a sensitive question, but what about the idea that you won't see your mother again, or your father when he passes, or your wife or kid? That's how Mormonism often hooks people, is by promising them they'll see their family again. You don't have that assurance.
I'm comfortable with that now, because that's how it is. I can't wish it to be any different, and in fact, in the Jehovah's Witness theology, I wouldn't want their afterlife anyway, because the paradise that's on offer for Jehovah's Witnesses has been landscaped over the remains of 7.5 billion men, women, and children who've been slaughtered for the crime of not being Jehovah's Witnesses. I wouldn't be able to enjoy my slice of watermelon at the picnic table, knowing what's just a few feet underneath, So I don't want that quote unquote utopia. It wouldn't be a utopia, it would be a dystopia, especially given the fact that I would need to spend eternity praising the monster who's done that. No, thank you. That's not a paradise. Whether mum's there or not, it wouldn't be a paradise for me. I'm happy with the fact that when we die, we die. And if anything, that motivates me to try and make the very best of the life I have, rather than worrying about one that doesn't exist in the future.
I love it. Well, John Cedars or Lloyd Evans, it is such an honor to meet a fellow, I don't want to say soldier because that's a war metaphor. So a fellow activist in trying to wake people up, bring them some light and truth, to minimize pain and suffering, and to help, bring light to the world to the best that we can scratch it out. So it has been just a real honor to get to know you. Your credit to your people. And I would love to find a way to collaborate with you and others like you in the future, because this is important work you're doing,
Indeed, I've been aware of you for some time, and it's really nice to have this conversation. I feel honored to be on the show, and I really hope it's not the last time we work together.
All right, Lloyd Evans, everybody. And just to plug again, his website is reluctantapostate.co. He has 2 books that you can check out. The books are called The Reluctant Apostate, and then How to Escape from Jehovah's Witnesses. And of course, he has a YouTube channel, which is his bread and butter. And it's called the John Cedars channel, CEDARS, along with the, of course, jwsurvey.org and all the other things. You can find a page of links on reluctantapostate.co, along with his bio and other audio and video sources and merchandise, etc. If there are any Jehovah's Witnesses ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who are listening, please support Lloyd Evans and support his work, because this work can't continue without support.
And I would say the same thing for your work. It's a really valuable service you're providing. So I like to think together we're making a difference. And it's been an absolute pleasure to compare notes.
All right, Lloyd, you take care.
You too. Stay
in touch. Reach out if I can ever help with anything. And if you ever come to the United States, and especially Utah, you better let me know.
Oh, you'll regret making that offer.
All right, Lloyd, you take care.
Take care.
Thanks, listeners. See you guys again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast.